Please welcome CEO and founder of Aquacycl and 2023 Earthshot Prize finalist, Orianna Bretschger. CEO and founder of Boomitra and 2023 Earthshot Prize winner, Aadith Moorthy. Co-founder of Water.org and WaterEquity, Matt Damon. And CEO and co-founder of Water.org and WaterEquity, Gary White. For a conversation with Bloomberg Television Chief Africa Correspondent and Anchor, Jennifer Zabasajja.
We're first up. There we go. Good morning, everyone. We have to follow up Mike, guys. Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
Listen, let's just start with our Earthshot finalists and winners, maybe, because this first session is about scaling your solutions, right? And who knows it better than the two of you? Maybe you start first, though, by telling us what your solutions are.
So, hello, I'm Orianna Bretschger, CEO of Aquacycl. And Aquacycl provides a distributed approach to treat waste where it's generated with an energy neutral and carbon neutral technology.
I'm Aadith Moorthy, founder and CEO of Boomitra. And Boomitra works with farmers around the world to help them improve their soils, sequester carbon in their soils, and improve their incomes through the generation of carbon removal credits. And we do this around the world and powered by satellites and AI to measure carbon and to make it happen practically on the scale of hundreds of thousands of farmers today.
Wonderful. Congrats to the two of you. I think that's definitely well acknowledged. Matt, Gary, maybe you jump in because Water.org, you've done a lot of work, obviously, across the world with it. Talk to us about how you took it from an idea to what it is today.
When I met Gary 15 or 16 years ago and we decided to join forces, we were both doing direct impact work, meaning well drilling primarily, and Gary had been doing it a lot longer than I had. He's been doing it since 1990. And Gary had I think we both, independent of one another, knew that was not going to solve the problem, that there just wasn't enough charity to solve the problem, and drilling wells was just not going to get us there. So Gary had kind of a radical idea, which in retrospect seems pretty obvious, but it was to take the concepts that Muhammad Yunus pioneered at the Grameen Bank and apply them to the water sector. And that was a big thought leap for the microfinance institutions at the time because water wasn't seen as an income generating loan. You know, in classic Grameen Bank fashion, you know, you would loan me $200, I would buy, say, a sewing machine, and then I could work as a tailor. And to a banker, that makes sense. I can pay that back. But with water, what Gary realized from spending his career in and amongst these communities and talking to people about their experiences, he realized that the poorest people on the planet were actually paying for water, and in many cases up to 25 to 30% of their income on a daily basis, because what would you do for that first gallon of water, right? And so it was this incredible tax on them, but they didn't have any savings to, say, connect to existing infrastructure. You know, a water connection might cost a couple $100s, and they didn't have that kind of savings. So if you could front them the money for a loan, they would be able to pay it back relatively easily because they were already paying for water. And so it was a kind of a thought leap for the microfinance institutions. So we piloted the idea. We worked with Gary. You know, we brought them along over time, and we proved it. And basically, as a result, to put it in context, in 2012 we celebrated the first 1 million people that we reached. And as of right now, we've reached 69 million people. And we actually recently did the math. Had we stayed with traditional charity, with that model of just drilling wells, it would have taken us 600 years to get where we are right now. So that's kind of the first part of our story, I would say. Yeah.
I mean, that is in and of itself scaling, right? I think that is safe to say. Gary, how do you think of it at this point?
Well, I think this is a $1.5 trillion problem if we're going to help people get access to water around the world. Right now, 2.2 billion people still don't have access. 3.5 billion don't have access to sanitation. And so what Matt's describing is that there's this incredible value creation for a woman who one day is maybe walking hours to collect water, or she's paying one of these water vendors that sell it from these tanker trucks, not even safe water, for a huge amount of money every day. And then all of a sudden, she has a water connection in her house. Overnight, she captures so much value for herself that it's easy for her to repay these affordable loans. And so we have this incredible demand out there. So we don't see people living in poverty necessarily as a charity problem to be solved as much as a market to be served. But then you see the $1.5 trillion need. So how do you connect the global capital markets to that woman making a few dollars a day? And that's what we do, right? We create the financial plumbing that allows investors to invest in our funds. So we also have launched an asset manager. So that asset manager raises debt and equity in the US and Europe, and then we provide wholesale capital to this network of 150 financial partners that we have around the world that are making these loans and scaling it up. So we've used philanthropic capital to basically set all this into motion, to basically de-risk this market so that it can be served. And so now we're on our fifth fund, and those funds allow investors to come in, make a competitive financial return, and then we take that money through our financial network. It gets broken into millions of microloans to do this. The most recent thing we're doing with our asset manager, WaterEquity, is now looking at infrastructure. So, oftentimes there are pipes in the ground for people in marginal neighborhoods to connect to, but sometimes there's not. And so this demand we've created from the bottom up has now got to be met by supply with infrastructure. So we just launched our first water and climate resilience infrastructure fund that will look at bringing capital, billions of dollars eventually, into the infrastructure area, complementing what the utilities can do, but bringing capital that's much needed, making sure that there's a deal flow there, and we have the investment pipeline so that we can then give investors the financial returns that they require while solving one of the world's most vexing problems. And to me, it's unconscionable that we still have billions of people who don't have what we have at the turn of the tap. And that alone should be reason enough to do this. But now, if we can create a financial return, a competitive return for investors, and we can make those connections, it's really on us to solve this problem.
Orianna, maybe jump in here, because you also work in water. I see you nodding over there. As someone who you're just starting out to a certain extent, right? I mean, how do you think about getting your business and your solution to potentially where water.org and WaterEquity is?
Yeah, absolutely. So scaling in water is a challenge for all of the reasons you guys just mentioned. And as an early stage water company with a new technology selling into a risk-averse, slow-to-change industry, there are several challenges. So one is awareness. And Aquacycl was in the Fix Our Climate category in 23, along with Boomitra. And what is also not well known within the climate space is that how we move and treat water today with our centralized infrastructure actually generates more greenhouse gas emissions than the entire shipping industry. 10% of emissions associated with moving and treating water. And we only treat about 20% of the global volumes that we generate. And so 80% of our agricultural runoff, our industrial waste, and our sewage, right, discharged into the environment with minimal or no treatment. So number one to scale is raising awareness of the issue. I bet several people in this room and watching have never heard that statistic before, right? Climate and water are intimately linked. So number one to scale, awareness. Number two, policy. Because it is risk averse, and it should be, right? Water and access to clean water is public health 101. And so that providing that access requires trusted infrastructure, trusted technologies. And so right now, there's not an incentive for a lot of big water companies or infrastructure operators to change to a new technology. And while regulations are in place, really there needs to be more incentive, right, to take on a perceived risk, which is a new technology. Even though it's been proven, right, there is a perceived risk which can be eliminated if there is an incentive to do so, and that can happen through policy. Number three, money. Right, as we just talked about. Because it's risk averse, because it's a slow to change industry, And because we are bringing a new technology which can really revolutionize how you treat and move water, right? These are all great things. But Aquacycl serves in the industrial sector primarily, right? So we've been working with PepsiCo for about 3 years. We're saving them 20 to 60% on their sewer bill. We're mitigating over 100 tons of greenhouse gas emissions every single month in a single 40-foot container at one facility. Now, the scale, right, can be gigatons in terms of climate and many, many millions of gallons of water in terms of access and reuse. It's a no-brainer, right? But because we are selling into the market that we are, right, it's slow adoption. And so financial investors are largely allergic to what we do. And so raising awareness, bringing in the capital, and seeing some more policy incentives to bring in new technologies like Aquacycl to solve some of these really pressing challenges.
As a 2024 Earthshot winner, I mean, have you experienced some of those challenges as well that Orianna was just outlining there?
Yeah, certainly. I think one of the key challenges, as our other colleagues here have said, is how can we funnel more finance into these sectors at the scale that is necessary for them to be done? So that has definitely been a challenge, but what we have been trying to do for that is demonstrate some key milestones towards definitely de-risking our entire sector as a whole. So one of the milestones that we have recently been achieving is showing repeatability in what we are able to do. So about 2 or 3 years ago, we were only really operating in Mexico and India, large-scale projects. Then we have expanded since then to Argentina, Paraguay, and now even Colombia, Costa Rica, and Mongolia, and Kenya, many different countries around the world. And we've been able to show the same model repeatably across those geographies. But at the same time, we've also been able to dramatically increase the amount of acreage in the existing projects. Like our project in Mexico doubled the amount of acres in the past year. So showing these increases in the ability to do impact on the ground, I think is very crucial. But as Mike said, it's not just about what's been done in the past, but what's also coming in the future. So I think we will have a very large milestone in the next 12 to 15 months that will enable us to further galvanize support and further ensure that we can prove to the financial community that investment is possible in this space. So in the next 12 to 15 months, we plan to transfer over $100 million to farmers and local communities around the world, while also demonstrating that our business, Boomitra, can be extremely profitable at the same time. Being extremely profitable while also transferring huge amounts of climate finance back to the communities. But this is just the start. We want to use that as the proving point to allow financial stakeholders from around the world to say, yes, we can invest in this and we can take this to the gigaton scale, because that's where all of us need to go. Like Orianna said, we need to reach the gigatons. How do you reach there? By achieving these milestones and then proving to the world that these things can be taken to the gigaton scale to move the needle on climate change.
Matt, Gary, are you too optimistic that, I mean, Orianna and Aadith were just noting, of course, a lot of the challenges that they are just experiencing. As you've been on this journey, are you optimistic that some of these barriers to scaling for founders like themselves and like yourselves will be broken down?
Yes, and I can really relate to everything you're saying. You know, when we had an event in 2012 to celebrate our first 1 million people reached, President Clinton came, and he's been a big booster of this work and a supporter of water.org all along. And he looked at the model, and he instantly recognized that it was going to work. To exactly what they're saying, we needed to prove it over and over and over again. And so what he said, he pulled me aside. He said, "You just got to run these numbers up. You got to run them up." He said, "You got to make it undeniable." And so that's what we spent the last decade plus doing, because I don't think either of us mentioned that these loans pay back at over 98%. And so think about that for a second. These are the most vulnerable. 90% of our borrowers are women, because this is an issue that disproportionately affects women and girls. It's left to them to do the water collection if they don't have access. So girls aren't in school. Just today, women will spend 200 million hours collecting water, right? Mm-hmm. So these women who are among the most vulnerable on the planet, financially speaking, are paying these loans back at 98+%. And this is repeated. We've done over 13 million of these loans. So these are very real numbers. And it just speaks, it's emotional for us because it's so heroic. These women who are in, they're in a failed market, right? And they're the victims of a failed market. And it's really about philosophically looking at people rather, as Gary said, rather than a charity case or to be solved, but as human beings and as customers and citizens. And this method has proved that if we just nudge the market towards them and get out of the way, people want to solve their own problems. And historically, half of the water projects around the world fail within 5 years. These don't, and the reason they don't is nobody takes a loan for something they don't want, right? These are the solutions that they know they need. They are choosing the solution that's right for them, and they're paying the loans back at these incredible rates, and that really is the story.
It's a reason to be incredibly optimistic, I think, because if we have gone from the paradigm of everybody in the world is so poor and equally poor that everybody needs a charity solution, and that was the paradigm. Now we've gotten to the point where we can actually provide not just a break even, but we can actually use capital to help them and provide the financial returns that the market needs. So we finally have line of sight on that 1.5 trillion. You guys know how much capital is out there to be invested, right? If the market is sending you the right signal. And so if we can actually use that signal with what we're doing, and frankly, looking at investing in businesses like yours, entrepreneurs around the world that are solving this as well, having the capital to deploy rapidly to scale those solutions, and then going to the capital markets and providing those financial returns, then absolutely we can solve it. We solved this problem 100 years ago here, in the US. There's no reason why we can't solve it around the world. Imagine if we found the cure for cancer, and 100 years from now, there were still 1 million people dying every year, which is what's happening with unsafe water. That's not conscionable. And now we have the tools to do this. And now that's why we're hopeful.
Really great place to leave it. Thank you all so much. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks,